Now reading tab is a little bit of a different story. Chord diagrams are easy because they're visual and you can see a shape and relate it to your fingers. Now reading tab is a little bit trickier because it's just numbers and it's harder to see the shape. So as we look at our first example, example number 1, you see that there's two stabs. There's a stab up top which says 4/4, and to the left of that there's what's called the treble clef. Now that's just the normal standard music staff. Now we're not going to read from that except for rhythms for a long time. But the staff below that says TAB, that's the tablature staff, and that's what we're going to read from for most of our material. So if you count the lines on that staff, you'll see that there's 6 different lines. Now each line is a string on the guitar, but it's a string on the guitar reversed in the way that the guitar is strung. So in other words, the line that's lowest to the bottom is the biggest string, the lowest sounding string on your guitar. So that first example that says 0, and there's a 0 that's written on that lowest line, the 0 is not the finger, the 0 is the fret. In this case, 0 means open, and the 0 is written on the lowest line, so that 0 is open E string. Now the next one, if you notice there's a 0 that moves up a line, that means we move up a string in pitch or down physically on the guitar, and there's a 0 there, that's your open A string. Then the next one moves down again, or up rather, so we move physically down, that's our open D string. The next one is an open G, then a B, and then the high E. So for the following examples, I'm going to do all of those up close so you can see a little bit more about how tab works from the player's perspective. So let's check it out. Alright, so for example 2, you'll notice that there's notes on the low E string, 0, 3, 4, and notes that are on the A string. There's a 2, a 4, and then a 2. So the way that we play this, the way that's best to play this as actually like a riff in itself, because tab doesn't tell you what fingers to use, you have to just kind of mess around and find what works, but I'm just going to kind of show you on this. So you want to do 0 and then 3, that's 3rd fret, so use your middle finger. And then 4th fret, you're going to use your ring finger. So first 3 notes, 0, 3, 4, and then 2 is on your A string. And the reason I'm using these fingers is because the notes that we need line up with this set of fingers. So any 2s we need, we use with this finger. Any 3rd fret notes with the middle. Any 4th fret notes with the ring. So the first few are 0, 3, 4 on the E string, and then 2 on the A string. Then you have a bar line which divides measures, and then we have a 4 on the A string, back to 2, to 3 on the E string, and then 2 on the E string. So example 2 altogether sounds like. One more time. Zero, 3, 4, 2, 4, 2, 3, 2. So that's how you read tab on the lower strings. Now reading chords in tab is a little bit trickier. You see that you have a stack of notes here on number 3. For the E chord, the way you want to do this is just go very slowly and go from the lowest string upwards. In other words, the lowest string on the guitar, the lowest line on your tab staff. So you see that you have a 0, that means, on the lowest line that is, that means that that note is going to be open, the low E string. And then you have a 2 and another 2 above that, and then a 1 above that. So it doesn't tell you it doesn't tell you what fingers to use, so you just kind of have to mess around a bit. But if you remember our open E shape, we decided to use this finger shape. So if we do, we just look at our open E chord in picture, and if you kind of match it up, you'll notice that there's a 0, and then on the next line up there's a 2. On the 3rd line from the bottom there's another 2. 4th line there's a 1, and then a 0 and another 0. So 0, 2, 2, 1, 0, 0. It's kind of like looking at the numbers of the frets of the chord, but upside down versus the way you play it here. So it's a little tricky. It's hard to look at an entire stack of notes and make sense of it all. But that's just kind of the name of the game here for now. Now, if we look past the double bar on this example, it's the same exact chord as just written out separately. And this is very common with tab, is that a lot of times you'll see a note, a bunch of notes that actually fall into a certain shape. So it's the same idea, but instead of strummed like this as a stack of notes, in other words, all the notes are ringing at the same exact time, you have them separately. 0, 2, 1, 2, 1, 0, 0. 0, 2, 2, 1, 0, 0. So the first half of example 3 is implying that you just strum your E just like that, so all the notes ring at one time. And the second half of example 3 is telling you to play that E chord, but note by note. Example 4 is tab on the upper strings. So we have a 0, a 2, a 3, and a 2 in our first measure, which would be played 0, 2, 3, 2. In this case, it's so simple you could use any finger. That works. Just keep in mind it's not down there, it's up here, because everything's flipped around. It's in relative pitch, in relation of how the pitch is. Now, past the double bars on example 4, we have a little note that says let ring, and it's a dotted line and it goes over everything present. Now what that means is that we need to find a way to let all these notes ring over each other as best as possible. So we have a 3, I'm going to use the middle finger for that. Again, this is just kind of knowledge here. You have to work it out on your own to figure out which fingers to use, but I'm just recommending you use finger 2. And we have a 3, that's on our second string. Then a 0 on the high string, back to 3. And then a 2 with our first finger. And the reason I'm using this finger and not this finger is because how are you going to get to a fret that's behind this note? How can you get your 2 and let this note still ring over? There's no way to get back there. So I use my middle finger. That's the first measure. 3, 0, 3, 2. Next measure, 3, 3, 3, 2. So a lot of times when you see a note like let ring, it's going to come out of some kind of a fingering shape, and you don't have the luxury of just plopping a finger down and playing the melody knowing you're going to lose the note and just play each note separately. So you have to actually kind of plan accordingly on that. So example number 5 is embellishing on that same concept of letting things ring. And as you notice, we've got a 0 and then a 2 and then a 2 and a 3 just in the first measure, and they're all on different strings. So it looks like a lot of skipping around. It'd be really rough to try and play it this way, where you go. Doesn't really sound good either, and to make them ring at the same time, you have to assume that somehow there's a hand shape that can hold all those notes down together. So what I like to do is kind of push them in my mind into a stack, and you can kind of see that 0, 2, 3, 2, if you go from low to high, forms a D shape. 0, 2, 3, 2. Now that's not the order we play the notes, but it gives you an idea of how to find the shape. So really this is just telling you to play a D chord, 0, 2, skip to the high string, 2, down to the second string of the 3rd fret. In that order. And then you have a note that's outside the D shape at the next bar, and that's at the 3rd fret, so you need to use your remaining finger, your pinky finger, to grab that note. Then you got a 3 at the 2nd string. And then you have a 2 back at the 1st string, which means that, oh, I need to lift off my pinky and play that original 2 again. So the second measure is 3 on the high string, 3 on the second string, 2 on the high string, 3 on the second string. So that whole 2 bars sounds like this. It's actually kind of pretty. Now on the last part of example 5 after the double bar, you see that you have 3 different chords. There's a D sus4, and a D sus2. Now a lot of times when you get tab off the internet, they won't have the names of the chords, they'll just have the stacks of notes. Forgive me, I'm losing my voice here, too much teaching. But what you want to look for is similarities within the shapes. So when you get comfortable with reading tab, you're going to know right off the bat that that little pair of notes, the D shape, the 0, 2, 3, 2 stack, is a D chord. You're just going to eventually be able to recognize that based on the number formation. Then as you look to the next one, you see that the only difference in that stack is that there's a 3 on the high string instead of a 2. So it's kind of, in time, it's actually pretty easy to recognize that and go, well, hey, that's that trick where I just put my pinky and get the 3 up top. And get my D sus4, it's called. So you just want to start to kind of look at it that way and not feel overwhelmed in the sense that there's 4 entirely new notes with an entirely new shape, because a lot of times when you get music, it's written from a player's perspective compositionally. In other words, they wrote it that way because it was pretty easy for them to play. And so it's quite likely that it's going to be easy for you to play. So the last shape you see is a 0, 2, 3, 0. Well, the only difference there is that you're opening up that top string. You're just lifting off your middle finger, lifting off your pinky and your middle finger just to play that string open. So a succession of chords like this is actually a lot easier than it might look from a reader's perspective once you get comfortable. It's just D, D sus4, all you're doing is putting your pinky on, and then you're lifting off your pinky and lifting off your middle to open up that high string. So only one string is moving. It's important to look at that and start to recognize what's moving inside of a shape and what isn't moving. Okay, you made it. Congratulations. I hope you enjoyed the lesson on reading chords and tab. I know that it's not the funnest thing in the world to do, but it's necessary to, get a working knowledge of music and to be able to find out songs, make sense of things you find online as well from, other tab sites. So, anyway, take it easy, study hard, and I'll see you next time. Peace.